doubt about it. Sometimes I grind my Excel sheets.
Yo, what's up? Yeah, we're gonna talk some more rookies. Asked in the Discord for a few extra names, and I was surprised how few rookies have actually done videos, to be honest. But yeah, Tamorrion Terry, whose name I'm butchering because I'm terrible. Basically. His name came up, and yeah, I'm gonna do a video on Tamorrion Terry now. I hope you enjoy it. He's a wide receiver coming from Florida State. We don't have combine metrics, and since I barely can feign interest in the combine when we have it, like I have been full on enjoying not paying attention to pro days. Recently went on Travis May from Rotoviz's podcast. And he was asking me a bunch of questions in the order of pro days coming up about rookies, and yeah, I guess he doesn't care much about the pro days either, despite the fact he's tracking it actively on Rotoviz, because he wouldn't have asked me on, I guess. But I had a lot of fun talking to him about rookies. Let me see. So I do know the scuttlebutt is that Tamorrion Terry is going to test well. He's going to look big. He's going to look great in a uniform. He's going to test throughout the gymnasium or whatever it is they're testing them in. Cool. Alright. This video might break down the way I look at rookies, especially before we have any information about where they're going to be drafted or where they're going to play in 2021, is specifically around their production. How well they produced compared to past players who are good in the NFL, and then past players in their conference, and then past players that, on that team recently and also through history. So I kind of got like a 3-tier system going. Just looking for anyone who managed to stand out across either tier there, compared to other players, compared to other good players. My base assumption is good players do well, and generally that's what happens. So let's talk about Tamorrion Terry a little bit, and I'll get off this big screen because I really don't like it, to grind through my database a little bit and show you some statistics from him and how his production compares to past players, if that sounds like it's interesting at all to you. I would say, I was thinking about how I wanted to introduce Tamorrion to you, and I was like, I'm really tired of saying this player has an interesting profile, because it feels like everyone in the 2021 class is interesting, and it felt that way with the 2020 and the 2019. But thinking about the opposite, like I could get my videos under 10 minutes, finally, if I just did bad prospects, because it would be like, yeah, look, this guy didn't do much. Here he is not meeting this threshold. Here he is being worse than this player. I don't like him. That get under 10 minutes, but like, there's a reasons certain players, there are some players who are sticking up, not in metrics, like Jalen Waddle, who therefore require a bit more investigation, but mostly I'm going to be talking about players who have interesting-ish, at least, profiles, unless someone asks me to look at a profile on the Discord or on Patreon, specifically, that hasn't stood out otherwise. So yeah, he's got an interesting nature to his profile. I actually liked him a lot more before I started digging into this class and ran my pre-draft profile on him, specifically because he didn't play until the age of 20, and I thought that might catch some nerds out. Using the AJ Green or Calvin Ridley rule, if a player doesn't play till they're 20, you don't use their breakout age. It's a bad indicator at that point, because you can't really say they have a bad breakout age because they weren't playing. I mean, you can't break out if you're not on the field, and he didn't really start. Well, he didn't start playing in college, or the CFB level at least, until he was 20 years old. And so what you do from there is you do age-adjusted production. There's that first rung of, that first tier of profile. How does he compare to past players who played at that age, who were then good at the NFL? And yeah, he didn't do so badly, and we'll see some of that. We might even make a graph, because, you know, nerd. But yeah, the further I dug into his numbers compared to other players in this class, he just kept falling. I'll tell you what, when we start out there... Nearly got it that time. Yeah, this is just, you can't see much of it. Hang on. My pre-draft ranks as they stand right now, and I've got Tamorrion in this pure white tier, which is not a racial comment. It's just, I have no formatting on it. It's not green, it's not red, it's not bright green, and I've got a list of tiers up here, but really just a list of preferences. Ranks are kind of fake at this point. What this essentially means is there's interesting stuff on the profile, but I'll need something to be overly interested in them, like a landing spot or other information, whether it's tape evaluation or whatever else, or good draft capital or unexpected positive landing spot, to really be more interested in them than like a 3rd or 4th round pick. Like if I'm looking for a wide receiver in the 3rd or 4th round and everyone else is gone, this is the tier I'll be looking at. And to sort through them, they need a kicker. Like they don't compare well to, or they don't compare, for me at least, better than the players above them. And that's what this tier is. It's like, yeah, they look interesting, they're decent. I think they have some indication that they are good, better than most that come from the college level, but in and of themselves they don't stand out. They're not someone I'd ever target just because of the nature of their production profile, and that's a fairly loose description because it is fairly loose. There's a whole mix of profiles that end up in that tier. And we hope that the draft can sort them out better. Everyone from Keelan Stokes, who no one's heard of, to Amon-St. Ra, who's getting ranked really highly right now by DLF ADP. He's in the top 12. I think he's above Elijah Moore at this point. And I'm not that interested in Amon-Ra, but still. And Tamorrion Terry, Jalen Waddle, again, I did a Jalen Waddle video. Like, I don't not like him. His production, the best thing I can say about it is I can ignore it. That's fair. But that means I need something else to really like him for. And now he's probably going to get it because of draft capital. But we're doing Tamorrion Terry right now. So I got notes on him here, but let's do it live, as they say. All right, so let me skip over here to the big screen so you can... All right, here it is. Let's see. He fell pretty far down my pre-draft model when I finally ran it. He's coming out as a junior, or at least junior year is the last designation he has in college. He's 23 years old, so he's a slightly older prospect, which has limitations. And it's worth noting players seem to have a longer arc to their career if they're going to do well if they come in at a later age. On average, players coming into the league at 22 or 23, if they're going to break out, they're more likely to be 3rd year than 2nd year or 1st year breakouts, and also just in general, their career will arc at a slow rate if they're going to be good. It's worth knowing. Now, he is coming from Florida State, which isn't a powerhouse school in and of itself, but the ACC Atlantic is a fair drafted school. It's not like the NFL isn't aware of it or is scared about taking picks from that conference. And so, we can have a fair, decent amount of hope, especially someone that's probably going to measure pretty well according to Ray GQ and others who actually, watch stuff and say... Overall, he played 3 years. He's got 2,000 yards under his belt. He broke out the very first year he played, since I've already told you that he didn't start playing till he was 20. You can see he hit a 30% threshold and a 20% threshold in that same year, and that's the first year he played. Now, I don't tend to do it by year number, first, second, or third, but it's worth noting that the first chance this guy got to play, he broke out. He crossed the threshold. Now, he was also 20 years old, so he's not as much of a disadvantage as 18 and 19-year-olds, which is why breakout age, I think, has some sort of signal. And so we do have to... That's why I don't do it by first year breakout, second year breakout. I do it by age, because Terry was coming in more physically developed than those 18 and 19-year-olds, presumably a little more experienced, a little more mature, whatever benefits that age has, the older you get. And I like to think as a guy much older that it has lots of benefits, but yeah. It's just worth noting that it's good, but it's not the same as being an age 18 first year breakout or even 19 second year breakout. But it crosses the thresholds in both 20 and 30% threshold of breakout age. Like an age 20 breakout age is fine. You're in the group, okay? we're not going to discount you because of it, kind of a thing. No one's going to call you a late breakout player, and it is worth noting that that was the very first year he played. If we scan over a little bit, how many games did he play a year ago? Yeah, he played 2 full seasons before 2020 hit, where he played 6 games, which I'm just going to go ahead and assume is something to do with 2020, but obviously that is where the further research, when you dig into prospects a little bit more, especially as we get towards the draft, comes from. Like, what was actually going on in Florida State in 2020 is something I'll have to know the answer to before I start doing, for real drafting. But for now, I'm just happy to assume that. There's a fairly big disparity between his yards and touchdowns, in that he was a very prolific touchdown scorer. Like, he's got 40% of his of the team's touchdowns in his first season when he broke out, 37% in his second year, and you can see that his market share receiving yards is considerably lower than that. Now, we could come up with thresholds and binaries so we could understand what's a high and a low, but I just looked at this stuff a lot. I kind of have a pretty good gut feeling, but I think the discrepancy between getting 22% of yards and 40% of touchdowns, I don't think you need to have a lot of experience to understand that you are much more of a touchdown player than you are a receiving yard player. But again, that's his first year, and it does even out by his second season. To me, that shows some level of growth in the position as well, just as a first glance kind of a thing. This third year, he got 16% of receiving yards and 10% of touchdowns, which makes me think that 2020 might be more about his situation than the team's, to be honest. But yeah, let's go ahead and dig back through his team situation here by looking at Florida players. I know a few of them, but we may as well pull them up. So the last player, pardon me, it came from Florida State particularly that was of any interest to anyone. For our little fantasy game thing was Auden Tate. I remember him getting some decent buzz. He never scored particularly well for me, though he did do something in the NFL. He's been an NFL level player who actually had production, which is, we're judging by a different scale. We're looking at fantasy. I'm not saying Auden Tate shouldn't be proud of what he did in the NFL, that few people can ever actually do. But in terms of his production going to college, Tamorrion Terry was much more productive according to the pre-draft model than Auden Tate was, and so that's nice to know. Before that, you've got Rashad Green. Who didn't he have? 5th round draft capital. I remember liking him pretty well. My most recent pre-draft model, he had an age 18 breakout age at the 20% threshold, and he's the last person to have any kind of score, apart from Travis Rudolph apparently, around Tamorrion Terry's in my pre-draft model. Kelvin Benjamin, also from that exact same team. I did not know that Benjamin was from this exact same team, actually. That's interesting because Benjamin's one of those late breakout players who actually had a top 24 season, and I kind of enjoyed that in redraft, but really sold hard in Dynasty because he had this older breakout age, as you can see, age 22, and he looked to me like a late breakout producer, and I never quite bought in fully for the Dynasty, and that worked out. I can't say that's ultimately true. Like, Benjamin might actually be evidence that players who get drafted earlier with later breakout ages shouldn't have so much put against their breakout age, because the very few players who are drafted early with late breakout ages, there are very, very few of them. Benjamin's one, and he had a top 24 season. We don't know how his career would have worked out if his exact path of, what was he, dropped, cut, traded from the Panthers eventually? With Cam Newton being injured 1 year, he could have had a better career arc outside of things that he had no control of. To be completely fair, I don't want to count, hits as hits when it's hard to say it was a complete miss, that he couldn't have had a better career. But still, as it is, it just fits nicely into my nice little trend pattern in terms of breakout and breakout age. So that's worth noting, since Tamorrion Terry also only played at 20 at the same school, although certainly not in recent history, and they were playing on very different teams at the time. If we skip over to just Dominator rating here, you can kind of see the difference of why my model would like, or my models and my preferences would like Tamorrion Terry, where he's got a 30% Dominator his first 2 years, age 20 and 21. And then Benjamin had nothing until he was 22 at that very last year, and didn't have a Dominator rating even as high as Tamorrion Terry's very first year, let alone his second year. And so you can kind of see the discrepancy in what I'm, an older player who did well compared to players playing at the same age, compared to a player who did kind of below average at an older age, and that's all he did. So that's why I didn't like Benjamin, and may or may not have been right too, to be fair, for Dynasty, and Tamorrion Terry is scoring a little higher. I think that's fairly interesting context. Who else we got around here? Anquan Boldin, okay. Yeah, Bolden's one of those players at the 40% threshold in your last year means that I kind of have to let go of the late breakout narrative or late breakout trope I use sometimes. If you hit so hard, especially with the way Bolden's career played out at Florida State. But that's coming to the very edge of my data window from 2000 to 2020. So I've never really been able to prospect him nearly as well. Yeah, he was drafted in 2003, so I don't have his full college career, as it were. And so he's always been a hard one to add to that late breakout narrative. But still, those are players that have come from Alden Tate. I think Terry's the most interesting player since Benjamin, put it that way. And Benjamin really shot up because he had that first-round draft capital. I don't think Terry's going to get in that conversation. This draft class is fairly rich, fairly thick. And fewer teams are just betting on size purely for size sake these days, I think. But you never know. We can hope for the lad, you know. Alright, Florida State, yeah, I've already got selected 2012, 2020, that's fine. Here I've got the same data, but it's organized by year, just because I feel it's a little easier sometimes to see what's happening if you can see it play out by year. So the first year Terry plays is 2018. He's a wide receiver 1, obviously, for the team, age 20. Who was wide receiver 1 the year before, though? Alden Tate. Okay, so Alden Tate's left to go to the NFL. That's why the spot's available. But it's worth noticing Murray here, I'm not going to try the first name, apologize, sir, is already on the team, and Terry jumps over him. I like that in the sense that, since we have no evidence of what Terry would have done between ages 18 and 19, it's nice to know that he was at a disadvantage compared to Murray, at least. He hadn't been on the team as long, the coaching staff didn't know him as well, he hasn't learned that particular route tree or that team's playbook as much as Murray has, at least, and he walks in and just takes, you know, the wide receiver 1 job, at least in terms of total opportunity, and I think points as well. 2018, where are you? Oh yeah, he outscores Murray fairly comfortably, 157 points to 146. So yeah, he walked in and took someone else's job his first year on the team. Kind of like that. Not for Murray, obviously, but for Terry, it's a good signal that he was displaying the capacity. Coaching staff liked him enough, even though he's new on the team, and he was able to co-opt a large share of the offense. That's pretty cool. He continues that domination into year 2. Again, Murray disappears. I assume Murray went to the NFL or a car dealership somewhere. Sounds a little harsh, but probably. DJ Matthews, who's already been on the team as well. He's playing at a younger age. As a freshman in 2017. Yeah, he looks like he was actually recruited, whereas Terry's come in later, and he's still being kept down significantly by Terry. Yeah, he was the best wide receiver on the team. It's pretty clear. And that might be his physical nature. Again, you kind of have to be aware of that. Being physically dominant can be a positive or a negative when you take into more context. If you're underproducing and you're the most physically dominant player on the team, that's a bad thing. That's a Cordero Patterson type rule. You know, if you're the most athletic person in the conference and you can't produce in college, that probably means you're not very good. Whereas Terry was actually producing and taking jobs and names and chewing bubblegum, or however that saying goes, as an athletic player. So let's take a look at something here. I mean, how much bubblegum was he chewing? Would be the question. So here I'm going to go back to the tier 1 type comparison, and don't start telling me, you know, you said tier 1 and tier 2. I'm using random words to try and frame my process. It's not like it's set in stone that I call this tier 1 analysis or anything silly. It's just useful device here. So essentially what I'm doing is going back to, instead of comparing to players on his team specifically over the last few years while he was playing, I want to go back, now I understand a little bit more of happened to him on that team, what he did on that team, should I say, and compare him back to players that have been good in the NFL. So all I'm looking at here is his market share of receiving yards compared to everyone who's had a top 24 season since 2008? Yeah, like, give me data labels. That sounds fun. By age. So that's from every conference ever, everywhere. Come here. Okay. So you might have seen me post graphs like this, and I've used them in other videos, but that's how I make them. I've got a list of the players who've had at least one top 24 season, and I'm creating all the little blue dots using that data. By age, 18, 19, 20, this is their market share of receiving yards across the top. The dots at the top are typically DJ Moore, Demaryius Thomas, for example. And then I've got this class's data over here, and so I can map that as a second line or a second series of dots, and this is Tamorrion Terry right there. So, again, at age 20, comes in with that 23% market share of receiving yards. His dominator is helped up by that huge touchdown share, but he's slightly below average, but so are plenty of other players. But remember, this is his first season, so we've got a lot of context going on, so that's not exactly where we want it to be. But then he does balloon up over the average of successful players at age 21. So that's adjusting it by age and not discounting him because he didn't play these 2 years. This is overall a positive score. Just in terms of his market share receiving yards, I'm not seeing, what was I describing it as before on those other videos, like a big punch. It's not like he breaks 40% dominator anywhere. I guess you could say an overall good thing is that he walks onto this team through whatever situation. Again, I'll have to find out if it was JUCO or is like with some other teams. I know some players can't join college teams because of the way their high school allows them to declare eligibility, for example. So that something like that might have been going on with Terry, or maybe it was off-field concerns, which is more of a worry. Either way, what I know right now is that he stepped onto the field, became the dominant wide receiver one, as dominant as any half-decent player that's ever come from Florida State, from Kelvin Benjamin all the way to Alden Tate, and he's more productive and more impressive in that role than even Kelvin Benjamin was, who got first-round draft capital and a top 24 season. I think that's a full description, around about, right? He did that his very first year, and he maintained and progressed in that dominance. And this last year, I have to find out why he specifically played so little. Yeah, it looks like other players in 2020 played 8 and 9 games, so he may have been injured or opted out. I don't know. I have to check into that history. So the 2020 season, this down year, can be written off very often this year because it was 2020, but also because there's some more to the story there. I really can't inbuild it into my understanding of who he is. He steps onto the team, becomes as dominant as any player ever has at Florida State in recent years, and was more impressive doing it than the last player from that team who had a top 24 season. When you compare him to all players who've had top 24 seasons, his production by age, I mean, that's pretty much around the average line, right? I mean, you can see from the dots under the line here that some players don't do it every year, but the 2 years we can definitely use to evaluate him compared to him, even from Florida State. Yeah, he looks good. He didn't hit a sour note here. Being slightly under the line isn't wholly negative, especially when we've got no other information beforehand. That would be the negative, that we don't know what he would have done if he wasn't getting the benefit of playing at 20, but also stepping into the team at age 20 is kind of a negative. And so, yeah, overall I like this trend line. It's not as impressive as players I've gotten tiers above him overall, but I think he was good. Again, I think that might be the best way of saying it. He's the most impressive production player we've seen come from Florida State since 2012. And before that, probably. He was more impressive than Kelvin Benjamin, who is the most successful player from Florida State in very recent history, at least, or at least since 2012. And I think he's one to watch. Yeah, I want to know where he lands. I want to dig in to find out why he didn't play until he's 20. And I want to know why he wasn't playing as much in 2020. I want to know why he didn't play until he was 20 years old, and then I want to know why he didn't play as much in 2020. A lot of 20s in that sentence. But, and in so doing, hopefully I'll learn more about the context of this production and that touchdown to yards discrepancy we saw in his market share receiving yards. Now, obviously, we're just talking about Dominator and market share receiving yards and touchdowns here. And that's, that's one stat I look at a lot. I think it's the one everyone's comfortable with. But the new hotness, as it were, for publicly available data, however, is yards per team pass attempt for wide receivers specifically. And so obviously I want to take a closer look at this and how well it compares. I happen to know two yards per team pass attempt seems to be a pretty interesting threshold for wide receivers, and he crosses that in the age 21 season. I don't know per team or per conference, but I do have this calculated over here, don't I? I'm not sure. Oh, that's too far. You'll be able to make it out because it's ballooning. But where is it? Yeah, yards per team pass attempt. For all players with 30 or more touches, I've already got that adjustment in here, and he was above the average by 0.21. So that's how far over his conference average he was as a wide receiver 1. And above his teammates, he was 0.24. How well does that compare? Because I can't provide context for every stat in every short video, but you can dig through and find. And also, I've got a conference tab in here so you can see what's typical and what's not typical. But as a brief example, like Kelvin Benjamin, in his best year, was right on the conference and right on the team average. Well, actually, it was actually about as above the conference average as Terry was both of the years he played, but he was only just above team average, which is part of where the concern came from with Benjamin. He wasn't overly impressive compared to his teammates, even in his big blow-up year, according to yards per team pass attempt. But Terry doesn't have that problem. But yeah, obviously we want to look at some of the stats as well, but as an initial breakdown. Didn't mean to click that. Sorry. Yeah, that's basically actually when I look over it. So now I want to dig more into his other stats, specifically yards per team pass attempt, how well that compares to other players, and get a better sense of how his college career flowed. Now, I could do that before I make these videos, but don't want to. My opinion shouldn't be your opinion. And the thing that I have and I've done a lot that might be something someone else can benefit from is I've dug through production a lot and interpreting and describing what production numbers mean. And so that's what I'm trying to do with videos. If you would like me to get a more thorough ranking, well, I'll see you after the draft when I'll be re-ranking all these guys and I'll know everything about them. But for these pre-draft videos, I'm trying to keep it loose, keep it light. Just here's me looking through the production, having done a lot of experience and practice and having looked at a lot of production profiles, and that's what I see. And I would encourage you to look at them as well. Link to the databases in the description. It's free. Don't panic. I'm not like, buy my shit. That's not what this is about. I just want us all to be able to play, and having done this a lot, that's where his production reads for me. Overall, positive. I have some questions, but I think it's a very impressive prospect coming from where he's coming from. And the draft is going to tell me a lot more about how much potential he has to earn opportunity in the NFL. But his production was pretty decent, actually. I liked it at first glance. He faded a little because of other breakout age and age-adjusted stats just kind of slide towards some other players, as well as likelihood of draft capital. But still, taking a second glance in it after he's fallen down my production model, I think he looks good. I still see a lot to like there. I want to learn a lot more about him. His production looks decent. If he was the one that randomly got first round draft capital, I'd actually be pretty excited compared to Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin walked out, so, shows what I know. But, yeah, that's what I see. Hopefully it's interesting to you. Probably not. Keep pushing buttons when I don't mean to. I apologize. But, that's what I see in Tamorrion Terry. It's a very interesting profile. And hopefully you now know at least the beginnings of how I start to describe what an interesting profile is. He's not an underproducer. He was producing well. I wouldn't say he has any of those big punches like a Calvin Ridley started to play late, but was significantly above the average, a much more competitive team than Florida State ever has been, and so his profile just looked slightly more positive, and I even had to be talked into him a little bit before he got his draft capital, at least. So, yeah, he's not quite that level of prospect, which is again why he falls into this, interesting guy tier. Yeah, take a look yourself. Let me know. Go watch people who actually, know stuff about football and routes and how good people's hands are, I guess. But I think he compares pretty well to past prospects based on what he did at Florida State. That's what I got. I'm going now. Yeah. Thanks for checking out. If you didn't, see you next time, I guess. I don't know. Appreciate it. Bye.
Do you have the time to listen?